Radio commentators who today will analyze and interpret the day's startling news from the Pacific to Gulf. Good afternoon, everybody. Japan has made war on the United States without defense.
Welcome to the last day of the Family Tree Academy Weekend Conference. And thank you so much for waiting. I'm really sorry, I guess it's one of the hazards. It's like, don't work with animals or children or live technology. But anyway, hopefully we've got there and we're going to have a fantastic time. We're going to be talking about the skills you need as a family historian enthusiast of today. But first, we're going to introduce the panel. And we've got Torsten Cooks, and you may have heard his presentation earlier. He's from Family Search, and he was showing us some of the brilliant ideas of things you can do with your family history online and get people involved more with it. We've also got Karen Evans, and regular readers of Family Tree magazine may well recognise her, of course, from her monthly DNA workshop. And we also have Penny Walters, and she is a specialist in the psychology of searching and ethics as well. And these are very important aspects of researching our family history today, particularly with the DNA pattern as well. And we have Michelle Leonard, and she's the official genetic genealogist on Ancestry Hour, and she's also author or co-author of the Pen and Sword book on DNA. So you've got a real host of skills there. If you have any questions, please do pitch them in, and we're going to start discussing about the many kind of aspects and facets around things that we need to get under our belt to be a really fantastic family historian today. From DNA to digital to our online courses, all the different things, social media. So I thought we'll kick off really, Karen, like over lockdown, more and more people have been getting into family history, and DNA tests is continuing to sell really well. So just let's say somebody is just right at the start of their journey and they've maybe done a test or maybe started their family history. What would you recommend them to do to start get going with their to build their tree and learn a little bit more about their DNA?
Yeah, so basically, I think if I've taken my first test 3 years ago, and I think if someone had sort of said to me the following things, I think I would have found them really useful. And I thought, I've been searching my tree for 30 odd years, and I thought, yeah, tree sorted, DNA will come along, I'll go, but it's going to be so easy. And I was just really naive. I think I would get my tree as DNA ready. I call it DNA ready, and really for that is I would look at trying to extend my tree out as much as I possibly can. I think the danger is you follow your grandparents and your great-grandparents and your great-grandparents and try and move up. And then maybe as you get stuck, you start moving sideways, or that's pretty much where I started to do. But actually, it's often the sideways matches, it's the sideways links of where your matches are going to lie. So really building that tree out as far as you possibly can, looking for potential DNA matches. And I'd also say try and build your tree down as far down as you possibly can into living memory, because again, my parents are both alive, and I hadn't really thought of putting their cousins and their children of their cousins, even though they got cousins who both my mum and dad are younger children of a very large families. So they had cousins who were grown up when they were born. So they'd obviously had children, and you kind of lose track of those people. And again, they're often the people who've tested. And you look and they don't mean anything. But if I'd sort of said, okay, who did your cousin marry, and do you know if they had any children? That would be the sort of thing that I would be interested in finding out. And I think also, as we were discussing earlier about where I'm from, we're sort of Midlands based, and so was my sort of ancestors. But there are always a few that have emigrated, and of course they're the big testers. I had lots and lots of matches from America, and as time went on, I realised they were the people who'd emigrated, and they were the descendants. And I hadn't really taken enough notice of those. I kind of know they've gone, if you like that, randomly. And they're the sort of the links you're going to find first. I'm not saying the easiest links, but certainly the links that I sort of went for first, really.
That's a really good point, Michelle. I know that you're a huge fan, aren't you, of using your traditional research skills to really build out your tree, just how Karen was saying, to make sure you haven't just got a direct line. You've kind of built up a web of ancestors and living relatives that really help you kind of catch your DNA matches and be able to allocate them. So what I find is there's so many, so that's good, we can do that. But when you're looking at your DNA matches, it can be a bit overwhelming, like what tools to use, should you export your results? So let's say they've got a fairly robust tree, they're getting some sidelines in, they're getting to grips with their DNA test. Would you recommend that they really explore the website that they tested with, or do you reckon they should export? Or what should kind of be people's next steps? What's kind of handy strategy to take?
Okay, so absolutely, I agree that when people are building their trees, often they just want to look at the direct ancestors. And for DNA, it's exceptionally important to build out your collateral lines, the siblings of your direct ancestors, and build them down to living descendants, because in essence, it's these people that are going to show up in your DNA match list. But in your example, when somebody, I always say, get to grips with the site you've tested at first. Don't overwhelm yourself. Don't test somewhere and then take your DNA and try and put it everywhere within a day or something, and you might completely bamboozle yourself doing that. Wherever you test, get to grips with that site first, understand how it works, and then down the line, yes, I completely recommend, let's say you've tested Ancestry first, you can then take your DNA from Ancestry and upload it to MyHeritage or Family Tree DNA or Living DNA. You can all of those companies accept raw data uploads. And that's a way to get more DNA matches. And that's another one of my big tips, and that's to fish in all the ponds, to get in all of the different databases, because you simply don't know where your best matches may choose to test. And that's especially true if you've got a mystery to solve or a brick wall you're trying to get to the bottom of. It might be that key match that's going to solve that for you is in the one database you're not in. So yes, it's very important to try and widen things out and use different tools in different databases, but take it at your own pace and don't try and overwhelm yourself with too much too soon, when it's best to get used to the first place you've tested first and get a really good grounding in understanding DNA matches and how to work with them.
That's a good idea. And all of us, whichever site we test on, you end up with so many matches. No one's going to have kind of be bored. They're going to have plenty to do, aren't they? Like more than enough to do. Like you both touched on researching living, because we're researching forward, so researching living family. And I think Penny, like that is something which really ties into topics that are really close to your heart, isn't it? Like that kind of ethical aspect, because we're talking very much, we get really excited about it, it's our family history, but whether you're doing traditional research or DNA research, it's really easy to suddenly find yourself in quite a sensitive area. You might be finding out things that maybe certain other parts of your family didn't know about. So what do you feel about that? Like, what are good ways to kind of prepare for that, or prepare people who are helping do their DNA, prepare for whatever eventualities might unfold?
Well, I've always known that I was adopted, so I've got a really thorough tree from my parents, but my biological tree was a mystery until I did the DNA test. So the only way that I could actually work out my DNA testing was through including my children. So if you add people that you 100% know what the relationship is, so for example, 100% I know that that's my daughter and 100% I know that's my son, when I did DNA tests with them, I could immediately see relationships. But interestingly, my granddaughter is labelled as my first cousin. So I know for sure that this is my granddaughter because I was there at the birth. But the amount of DNA that we overlap by, she doesn't overlap with me as much as you might expect for a granddaughter. So I was already a bit confused because I didn't understand 100% about the DNA testing. So somebody that's done a very thorough tree and matches with me might be very surprised because they might suddenly have a match and I would be a very unexpected match for them. So in that sense, I think that people should, firstly, when they're doing DNA testing, open their minds to the possibilities of other relationships with the amount of DNA that you overlap with people, and also that at some stage somebody in a couple might have got themselves in a bit of a muddle. So in that sense, somebody might find that I'm their half sibling and either be shocked or horrified or overjoyed. We're not sure, but you don't want to push yourself onto anybody. But some of the people that I have found really, really helpful have been second and third cousins. So I'm not close enough to cause any family problems, but I'm close enough for us to collaborate about where I could be on their tree. I've also downloaded some consanguinity charts, which are how much DNA would take to be overlapping in that relationship. So I now know that my granddaughter is labelled as my first cousin, and I know for sure she's not. So that means that she hasn't inherited as much from me as she could. But I think that DNA testing has definitely opened some people's secrets and lies, and we're not in any position to be judging people. So, if somebody contacts you, try and be empathetic or sympathetic and have an open mind.
That is a really good point, Penny, because whether it's traditional or paper trail research, you can come across these problems. And we've actually taken it away from DNA, so to interrupt everyone. We've got some questions, and they're really more for Torsten. There's a couple of questions, one of which will just make you laugh. It's a good question, but it'll be an impossible one to answer right now. And it's from Diane Rogers, and she says, "What can't be done on the Family Search app?" But I suppose she means in comparison the app as opposed to the website. So I don't know whether there's a few things, like whether you can give a quick comparison between the two.
Yes, I'd love to, and I can, I totally agree with what has been said on DNA so far. I think the interesting part is that DNA brings us closer as well to our living relatives. While when we do our family history and build our trees, we often try to go back in history as far as we can. But with DNA, we often find ourselves, to closer to those who are living, who are present, who are with us today, and that's an interesting start or an interesting point where we can collaborate, and that's what Family Search is all about, is collaboration, and comparing the two, the website and the Family Tree app. Well, we hope that you can do everything in both, and we're working hard and making that happen, that you can actually have your mobile device and enjoy all you can do on Family Search on a website, taking your device. In fact, we have more people using the app than possibly the website in a given day, which shows that many people like to use their mobile devices to do that. So that's really a tough question to say which exact feature isn't available, but we have improved the app in the last year dramatically, and we are confident that you can search historical records, you can build your tree, you can upload memories, and for many things, I think it's even easier to use it because you have your device where the microphone, the camera is already built in, so you can upload an audio file, or you can take a picture that you've just taken of your grandchildren or so and upload it to a tree. Or if you come across an interesting picture of your ancestors, you can take it with your phone and you can immediately upload it.
And there's a separate Family Search Memories app as well, isn't there? And I've used that for recording my mum and just getting her to see some of her memories. Yes,
it is, but it really represents just a little subset of the Family Search website, the memories section, and it gives you easy tools to organize your memory gallery, as we call it. And you can do documents, you can photos, you can do audio files, but you can also use the Family Tree app to just record audio files and upload it to a specific person, or you can upload documents or photos just using the family tree app.
There's a question actually, and it's from Brian, and sorry to interrupt you, and he asks, have the panel interviewed family members themselves, and do you have any tips for interviewing family members? So I don't know, maybe stick with you, Torsten. Have you done that? Have you used the memories app? Have you interviewed your family? How have you got on? What advice would you offer Brian?
Yes, I have done that. In fact, I and some other people of my family have done that. And we've interviewed my mom, who passed away about 2 years ago. And we have it on audio now. And it's always a treasure to go back and to listen to her voice now when she's not here with us anymore. But using the Family Search Memories app, you actually get a little guide as well. If you click on the record audio button, then it shows you several questions that you could ask, that you could start with, and we think that this could be helpful. Also, if you go on Family Search and click on the Activities tab, there you have an experience that we call Record My Story, where you have a whole selection of questions that you could ask about your life, about education, childhood, about hobbies, what you like, family members. So you can find really a lot of ideas on the Family Search website to interview your family. I would always start with an easy question and with something that your family likes to do, because if you get someone to talk and get someone to getting someone excited, then it's a lot of fun to listen to those stories and to record them.
Has anyone else tried, like, whether you've used audio or video or interviewing people via paper? Yeah, Michelle?
Yeah, absolutely. I've interviewed a number of family members, just audio at this point, but I would love to do some video as well. I think the key thing is you're going to go in with a set of questions that you want to ask them, but if you stick too rigidly to that, you're going to miss gems. So let them talk. It doesn't matter if there's a bit of silence. They, don't jump straight in with the next subject, because they might, in a few seconds go, oh, and I remember, so, and whatever topic they end up on, go with it and let them remember as much as they possibly can about it before pushing on to, so what do you remember about this, or etc. etc. Don't be too prescriptive with your list of questions. Let the whole thing flow naturally. That would be my main tip.
That is a really good tip. I think probably as family historians, we're often on a goal and we have a mission of stuff we want to find out, but then letting them tell their story, they're telling you what they want you to know, they're telling you what they want to be handed on, and that's going to be the most precious thing, because that's quite an insight to somebody's character, isn't it? Penny, sorry, you were going to add something as well, weren't you? What were you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say that I've spent 25 or 30 years doing my tree, but what I haven't appreciated until recently is that in 4 or 5 generations, somebody will find me interesting. So we could also add our own memories to things. And whilst I'm adopted, so I haven't got the opportunity to interview my biological parents, sometimes I listen into Irish memories, because I get the accent and I get the social history. So even if you haven't got the possibility to listen to your own biological family, you can sidestep into, in my instance, people from the Irish communities, and I can add their accent into my head, and then I can add their anecdotal stories as maybe that would be typical for an average Irish family, and then I'll suddenly think, oh, now I can go and look for dog licenses, or I didn't know they had horses, or something that can then trigger a new line of investigation for me. So you can step sideways with lateral thinking with these memory recordings.
That's good. And I think so you've got technology then. It's like pretty much everyone has mentioned about using so audio tips. I think for Brian that would be using audio. What I found as well is that audio is sometimes better than video because people can forget that you're recording them. So that's kind of what I would advise. And then maybe if they're really super confident doing video. And we had one other question, and it was from Pat Adamson. It's from Torsten, and she, or maybe he, so Pat asked, is the place he mentioned not on the homepage that shows your surname? So that I think they want to know where you described in your presentation about how to get information about your surname. Where would you find that on the family search?
Just right on the homepage. It depends on the size of your device. If you're using a mobile device, you may have to scroll down just a little bit to get down to the second section, where it gives you a little search interface, and there you just type in your surname, or you could also just type familysearch.org/surname.
Okay, thank you. So far we've touched on DNA a little bit. Just to recap to everyone, we've talked about how to build out your trees, and we've also talked a little bit about using a bit of technology to record apps. And this is all useful stuff. And I think, Torsten, you were talking about sharing family history with living people. So what was everyone, you're big advocates of social media, obviously use it to connect with fellow family historians, to use it to connect with your families as well and share the family story with them. Like Karen, do you share out your family history via email or Facebook with your family members?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important. I think one of the things DNA's done, I was really lucky that I had a lot of history in terms of I knew who, or I thought who knew who my grandparents and great grandparents were, but I had no ephemera at all, no photos, no diaries, no Bibles. People talk about these things, and the fact that because of through DNA I've been able to link with people and we share things through emails and through Facebook. So I found people and they said, right, well, here's a photo of that person that I would never have had. So I think using emails and using Facebook or whatever medium that you find most comfortable has really opened up a door, and they become just not names, they are actual people, and you're able to see pictures and other things that somebody has held on to that is actually part of your family. So being able to share things through whatever medium people are comfortable with has been fantastic. It's really made people come alive for me. So yes, the DNA is great and it's all that sort of scientific feel, but it actually makes the people in my field that they're actually more real. I know there's a scientific element, but they become real people too, and I think that is a great joy. And yeah, in any way, if people want to share, I'm always really open to saying I would like to share, but I understand some people sometimes don't want to share, and that's fine too. I always say, look, I'm happy to share this, but sometimes people don't want to. They feel it's precious even to send a photograph, and I understand that too. But the fact that we've made a connection sometimes is enough. It is enough for me.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know whether we want to talk about other things you can online. So obviously there's lots of fun stuff you can do, but for a long time there have been lots of online learning opportunities, but I think since lockdown it has felt as though in the UK then the kind of online and learning opportunities, they have blossomed a bit. And I know Michelle and Penny, but Michelle, I was going to ask you about some of the DNA webinars and things which you're about. So do you use them a lot? Like, obviously you're teaching them. Like, what would you kind of recommend to people if they're looking out to try and expand their genealogy learning or their DNA learning?
I do use them. I think that we can always learn more, even if we're teachers, especially if we're teachers. So I do watch webinars by others on my topic, DNA, and I enjoy them. And sometimes I learn things, and sometimes I see different ways that other people are doing things that I don't do. So it's very worthwhile, no matter what level you're at, to take advantage of all the webinars that are out there. There's so much help out there, in terms of blogs, Facebook groups, traditional literature books, techniques. And online now, the virtual world with webinars and workshops and, you know, Q&A sessions and panels like this. So I definitely would encourage people to check all of that out. I do a lot of webinars for Legacy Family Tree webinars. There's now 185 webinars in the DNA category alone on the Legacy website. So that's definitely somewhere that you can get education, but there's lots on YouTube, for instance. Just quick Google can find you a lot of information. And as I say, the family history groups, and for DNA itself, I always recommend going to ISOG, the International Society for Genetic Genealogy. It's free, you can join it, but more than that, check out the ISOG wiki, where there's well over 600 articles on everything you can think of to do with genetic genealogy. So if you have a question and you're wondering about it, there will be something on the ISOG wiki about that, or questions that will have been asked in many of the different DNA Facebook groups. For instance, here in the UK, we have a great Facebook group run by Donna Rutherford for DNA and genealogy. And you can join globally, but it's UK based, and it is mainly for people looking for help with UK DNA. But there's also the ISOG group and Blaine Bettinger's group, Genetic Genealogy Tips and Techniques as well. And also there's Ancestry Hour, which I help run on a Tuesday evening, 7 to 8 p.m. UK time. And I come along and help answer DNA questions during that hour as well. And it's not just DNA, you can chat any sort of family history questions and discussions as well.
Those are really good tips. I think we've got to keep learning, haven't we? Yeah, what are you going to say, Karen?
Well, Michelle is absolutely right, and those are exactly the places I went to when I first wanted to learn about it. I went to Donna's site, I went to the wiki, these are exactly the same sites, because sometimes if you're uncomfortable and you feel that you don't know anything, because I think one of the things everyone finds, or I certainly did, I'm sure most of us, when it first comes, your DNA test comes, it's overwhelming. The information's overwhelming, the understanding is overwhelming, and people need different avenues. Some people like to go to ask questions and say, what's this mean? And they can get verbal information. Other people are too shy to type something down, and they want to quietly squirrel away and find information that's online that's going to be useful. And as Michelle said, you know, these are sites that are trustworthy, that they're going to give you the information that you can use properly in the wiki. So, and obviously with Michelle's Ancestry area, so there is different avenues. So it's sort of that. If you're someone who needs to chat, here's this. If you're someone who needs to squirrel away and find the information, here's this. If there's something where you need to watch a video so that you understand because you're a visual learner, there you go. And, you know, I suppose the only thing I would sort of say is that sometimes some of the things may confuse you to start off with. So it's a little bit a case of understanding where to go and what to understand, and sort of take time to understand what you've learned and how correct it might be. But, you know, obviously places like Michelle had mentioned are places that, you know, I always direct people to go to, because it's like their instant successes, if you like. You know, it's like, okay, didn't really understand that. Got it now. So, you know, feel confident, and then it's not a silly, everyone says it's not a silly question, but sometimes people really feel they're asking silly questions, but they never are. They never are.
Thank you. Penny, I know you've been teaching some courses through lockdown as well, haven't you, online? And it's interesting hearing you say about how you've been doing your webinars to an overseas audience, having to kind of wake up in the middle of the night to teach them. So what can you feel from your feedback you've had from some of your students? What is kind of some of the pleasures of being an online student, and what would you recommend to someone who's thinking of doing an online course or webinar?
Well, some of the webinars or the teaching that I do are things that I hope I know quite a bit about. And then there's other ones which, just to link back what back what you're saying was one of my webinars is mixing DNA results with a paper trail, because when I got my DNA results back, I didn't understand any of it, and I had to keep Googling words. So I didn't know what was a centimorgan and what's a haplogroup and what's a SNP, and it was just, so all I did was look at my ethnicity, which was really exciting. I'm adopted, I'm English, but it came back as Irish DNA. So I couldn't go any further. It was only when I had my daughter DNA tested that I realised that she's half of me. So she's 50% of my biology. And then, because obviously it was becoming that I'm a boring granny, I gave my granddaughter a DNA test. So the minute that I got my granddaughter's DNA test results was when it suddenly all clicked with me. So my advice with the DNA testing, and this is what I mentioned in the webinar, is to get people who you really, really know the relationship to you. So my granddaughter is theoretically a quarter of me. She's got 4 grandparents, so she's going to inherit a quarter of me. But the ethnicity became quite random, and this can also cause problems with DNA testing. So my 6 children's ethnicities vary hugely. So this could even cause problems with a paternity issue. So a dad could look at his children's DNA tests and they've all got different results. So it could even cause problems. So once you've played with all of your known relatives' DNA tests, you can then inform yourself. So some of the webinars that I do, I'm teaching things that I know about, and then others I explain that I didn't really understand this, so let's work through this together, you know. But the webinars can become a bit flat, so it's nice to have a lot of images and a lot of anecdotes and a lot of stories and places that people can use the tips that you've given. So I will explain a concept to people, then I will tell them, right, this is where I would go for further information, and then give them a little anecdote as to how I went right or how I went wrong in mixing my tree results with my DNA testing. But you can learn so much from these webinars now. Most people give out a handout, so I download it or print it to make notes as the person is speaking as well.
Thank you. I think that's a really good point, and Michelle mentioned as well, like on the legacy webinars, it's just there are so many, there's so much to learn that once we start learning a little bit, you realise you suddenly need to get quite specialist knowledge in lots of different facets of DNA. And we're never going to be able to touch on it all today. I just really want to finish off out of asking all of you, really, probably in turn, like out of the things that you use, do you have like one go-to, whether it's a Facebook group or a book or something that you really you just enjoy and find really, really fun and love learning from? So Karen, what do you really love? What would you recommend as a kind of really fun way to learn?
I would recommend the DNA genealogy site that for Donna Rutherford on Facebook, because there's so much information. And in fact, only during lockdown, she created a new webinar for people to watch on clustering their matches. And as Michelle said, you know, I sort of thought, yeah, it's great. I watched it and I was like, do you know what? I've never thought of doing that before. That is such a clever little idea. And so you learn little bits all the time. And so as you're going through this Facebook, often people put links to things. So, you know, I read articles or sort of doctrines on things and think, oh yeah, that's a really interesting way of looking at something. So to keep it from going, you know, it can be dry. So, you know, those little bits that of interest that are going to sort of keep going when sometimes not much is happening for you, you know, DNA wise.
What about you, Michelle? What would you recommend?
Oh, there's so many, it's hard to pick just one. What Karen was saying about the Facebook group, it's called DNA Help for Genealogy UK, just in case anyone was wondering what it's called. And one thing I would say about it is it's a large group, and all of these groups are large. So when you first join them, you don't want to jump straight in with questions, because so many people might have asked the question you've asked. So always search to see if you can find the answer you're looking for before you start asking your questions, and do a bit of reading and lurking about before you jump in. In terms of, you know, I personally like webinars, and I like people to start by watching a beginner's webinar, learning about the basics of DNA. And I always say that you're only going to take in a small portion of that webinar, so rewatch it. And if the webinar teacher style doesn't really resonate with you, try another, because different presenters are going to resonate with you in different ways. So try watching about the same information, beginners on DNA, you know, several different people's take, and eventually you'll take it in. But my number one tip is always, always, always to work with your own DNA tests and practice, 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 because that's when it really sinks in how to do it. That's that you can, you know, you will find that as you're working with it, oh, what does this mean? Go and look it up in the ISOG wiki, go and find a webinar about it, go and look in the Facebook groups, go and find a blog. There's so many things, but just get hands-on with it and you will find it sinks in slowly.
That's a great tip, just to get on with it. Yeah. And Penny, what about you? What would be your kind of recommendation?
Firstly, my recommendation would be that people get a consanguinity chart. You can Google it and download it, because I'm adopted and somebody emails me with a DNA match, I don't know what on earth they're talking about. So as soon as I've got the relationship chart, I can see that they fall into second or third cousins or great grandparents or whatever it is. So I really like the relationship charts. Secondly, I get my Family Tree magazine. I read the Family Tree magazine for interest, and then I go back through it with a highlighter pen and stick-it notes. So I just read it for interest and then I make notes. Also, just by coincidence, I've got my two books, Ethical Dilemmas in Genealogy and The Psychology of Searching, and many of my colleagues have written books, and I found that I've had more time now to read books. And I think that collaboration is the key, because you can be quite insular sitting down doing your tree. 3, 4, 5 hours can go by and you can get quite involved with yourself, whereas as soon as you reach out to somebody, it turns out that somebody had a nickname, or they moved, or they had 2 wives. So collaboration is the key. My favorite forum on Facebook is DNA Detectives, because people who are adopted are trying to get hints and tips from there. And the Family Search website is just a massive mine of information, and therefore that would be another go-to place that I would suggest as well, because every single time I go onto Family Search, there's another thing that I'd never noticed before. So there's literally loads and loads on there, and those people are very, very dedicated through their religion. They're not just doing it as a hobby, they're absolutely dedicated, and therefore that website is a mine of information as well.
Cool, thanks, Wendy. I think you would agree with that then, Dawson, wouldn't you? Actually, before you say what your recommendation would be, then there's been a last-minute question from somebody, and it's from Maureen Kerrigan, and she says, how does she transfer her tree from Ancestry to Family Search? So I think that probably would be one, Maureen, if you could be Dawson may want to answer it now, but otherwise, if you emailed me at helen.t@family-tree.co.uk, we'll put the link into the Facebook conversation, and then we can give you tips, or Torsten can give you tips as well. Yeah, what do you recommend?
Yeah.
What do you want to say now, Torsten?
Yeah, I mean, I can say something really quickly, there is an option, there's a collaboration with Ancestry where you can transfer some data. I think it's currently in a beta testing stage, but another option, an easy option, would be to maybe begin with the JetCom file that you can export, and then you can import that on FamilySearch.org, and with that, then to go in a little more detail, that would take a little longer time, because there are some pitfalls that could happen if you upload a very large JetCom file in creating duplication. But I think there are some ways you can do that, or using a third-party software where you have stored your own family tree, and then you can sync it up with the Family Search family tree. So there are very different options on how you could do that. if I can just say, thank you, Penny, for your recommendation on Family Search. If you type in familysearch.org/DNA, you find a very short description on what options of DNA tests are available. If you're very new to this and want to start, it will tell you what to do with DNA matches, but also it has some Q&A and it has basically a whole bunch of terminology, like a glossary of what type of terminology is used in DNA, like we heard centimorgans or SNPs or other terminology that you would hear when you're researching on DNA, and Family Search provides a little glossary that should help you to understand what those terminology means and how you can use it.
Yeah, that's a great tip. It's nice to have places to always go. So I'd just like to thank you all so much. Thank you all for waiting. Thank you for anyone who is listening for waiting. So I'm really sorry about that. I hope you found it worthwhile and enjoyed it. And thank you so much, everybody, for your wonderful tips on just searching online and having fun and learning more, because that's the main point. And this session will be recorded, so anyone who hasn't managed to watch it, you can watch it later. So just thank you very much to everyone, and good night.
Thank you.
Bye.